Ahead of the 50th anniversary of the Banker's Top 1000 World Banks ranking, featured in our July 2020 issue, we're looking at how the banking and financial services sectors have evolved over the past decades around the world. And in this episode, we're looking at the Middle East. I'm John Everington, the Middle East and Africa editor at The Banker, and I'm delighted to speak today with Chiro Ghosh, who's the VP of Research at Bahrain-based investment bank SICO. Chiro, thanks very much indeed for joining us today.
Thanks, John. Thanks for inviting me over.
So looking back at perhaps, say, the last 20 years, what are the two or three biggest changes in the way that banking occurs across the Middle East that come to mind for you?
So for any banking sector across the world, there are two primary things which impact them. One is the fiscal side of it, and one is the monetary side of it. So from the fiscal side, we see still in this region, the whole economy is dependent, or a significant part of the economy is dependent on government spending. And government spending is kind of dependent on oil prices. So that was effectively impacting the diversification potential of most banks. So most of the countries in the GCC are trying hard to move and moving away from oil on dependence on oil prices. Saudi is opening up their economy. Dubai and other economies are stressing on tourism. So that has been one of the biggest development in this region, which is indirectly or directly helping the banking sector. The central banks have also taken steps to support the banking system. They have tried to be a lot more vigilant and a lot more prudent with the approach with which they're following the banks in this region.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. And I mean, talking about that prudent approach, one of the big things was the global financial crisis, which brings back memory within the Middle East of the likes of Dubai World and Our Capita, many others that really suffered at that point. How did the sort of banks in the region fare with the global financial crisis compared with their global peers, would you say? And where are they now? I mean, have they recovered now?
Yes, they have. But if you overall see the central bank, it was a learning process for even the central bank. So they have been a lot more prudent, a lot more vigilant now. We see the loan to deposit ratio, which the banks had to maintain in the past, is lowered, is much lower now. So the banks are not just going ahead and lending. The provision which the banks have to make has been increased. The capital requirement of GCC-based banks is a lot more than what is required by a developed bank. So central bank is doing their bit to ensure that the banks are in a much more healthier condition.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, it's interesting, and this is going to be particularly relevant with the coronavirus crisis as well. Going back a little bit of time, I mean, Bahrain, particularly within the 80s, was one of the sort of key banking hubs within the Middle East. And then since that time, there have been other hubs that have sprung up in the region, particularly in Dubai, larger banking groups, particularly, I mean, for example, QNB, one of the biggest banks in the region now. How do you see Bahrain's role as a financial hub developing in the coming years?
Look, if you primarily look from the retail side, of course, Bahrain has a disadvantage because of a smaller economy. But when we come to wholesale banking, investment banking, Bahrain still has a lot of potential. The biggest advantage Bahrain has is the cost of living is a lot cheaper. The policies are a lot more supportive. The tax rates are a lot more supportive. The local infrastructure is much better. So traveling within Bahrain is much easier. So overall, Bahrain still has a lot to give, and they can actually regain their position as the banking hub in the region.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things like FinTech Bay and the sort of the FinTech strategy of Bahrain develops.
We see multiple conferences that keeps happening in Bahrain, and they're really trying hard to find their position back in to regain their leadership in the as a banking hub.
Yeah, indeed. And just before we finish, we're looking at the impact of the coronavirus crisis on banks around the world at the moment in various ways. What do you think the long-term impact of the virus and the spread is going to be on banks within the Middle East?
Look, banks are the barometer of an economy. So if an economy struggles, it's not possible for a bank to be totally immune to it. But, if human history has to be seen, you will see after any major crisis, things have only improved. So what we expect to see would be a lot more digital banking, lot more branchless banking happening. So government stimulus to the people, to its residents would be through the banking system. No direct payment will happen. We expect the banks to be a lot more streamlined with their operating expenses. So that the whole working model, we believe, will overall change if this coronavirus or COVID-19 remains a little longer. So everybody will refine their way of doing business. So overall, it will be interesting times ahead for us.
Indeed, yeah. Still early days, and we'll see how it all pans out. Chiro, thank you so much indeed for joining us today, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. Very much appreciate your time.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me here.